held as a hybrid meeting. The meeting is being recorded and will be available via the Council's website to be viewed as soon as is practicable following the meeting. Everyone participating in the meeting will be accessing this meeting either from the Council chamber or from remote locations. Please could everybody ensure that mobile phones are switched off or to silent mode. Members will have received an electronic copy of the agenda. I will ask officers to present a summary of the key points. For the record, the agenda can be viewed on the Council's website. Members and officers will be speaking at various points during the meeting. Those speaking may switch their microphones and where remote their cameras on at that point, but I would ask that with the exception of myself as chairperson, at all other times you keep your cameras and microphones switched off, as this will help to minimise any background noise and interference and to ensure the connection remains as stable as possible. Whether in the chamber or remote, if any Cabinet members or officers wish to raise a point or question, they should press the hands up icon at the top right hand side of the Microsoft Teams window, and I'll come to you in the order I receive requests. Please lower your hand once you've finished speaking. The chat button has been disabled for this meeting. Please do not use your microphone until I invite you to do so. Officers from Democratic Services will be supporting the meeting and will be monitoring the use of microphones throughout the meeting, and when necessary will mute those not being used. I'd also ask the officers to introduce themselves as and when I invite them to speak during the course of the meeting. Officers too should ensure microphones and cameras are switched off when not in use, please. We'll now proceed to the agenda business, and the first item on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence from members, and all members of the Cabinet are present for today's meeting. We have had apologies from the Chief Executive, but all other members of the Corporate Management Board are present. We'll now receive any declarations of interest, of a personal or prejudicial interest, in accordance with the Code of Conduct adopted by the authority in September 2008. Are there any declarations of interest, please? No? And if you do identify an interest during the course of the meeting, then please indicate at that point. We'll now receive for approval the minutes of the last meeting of Cabinet, which took place on the 21st of November 2023. So can I have someone move them as a true and accurate record of that meeting?
Happy to move, Leader.
Thank you, Deputy Leader, and seconded by Councillor Farr. Everyone in agreement? Thank you, colleagues. We will now receive our first report on today's agenda, and that is on the volunteer policy and a review of that, and I will ask our Corporate Director for Social Services and Wellbeing to present this report. Over to you, please, Claire.
Thank you very much, Leader. For the purpose of the recording, I'm Claire Marchant, Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing, and I'm very pleased to present this afternoon a new corporate volunteer policy for your consideration as Cabinet. The policy is attached to the cover paper as Appendix 1. The policy provides a framework for volunteers that all parts of the Council and Department should operate consistently within in the engagement of volunteers. And the starting point of the policy is that volunteering is a good thing. Volunteers provide and make a positive contribution to communities across the county borough, and it's a good thing for parts of the council to engage volunteers. The scope of this policy is volunteers engaged by Bridgend County Borough Council. This policy doesn't cover volunteers engaged by the third sector and community organisations, but in our role as Safeguarding Authority, we would expect all organisations engaging volunteers to make sure that they've got a similar policy in place to ensure that volunteers engaged are operating safely. the sort of purpose and the reason for bringing forward this policy this afternoon really has safeguarding and health and safety at its heart, to ensure that people who are engaged to do work on behalf of the authority, be they on payroll and employees of the authority or volunteers, all have those very high standards in terms of checks, in terms of how they're engaged, and that we monitor their activity as well across the council. The development of this policy has been overseen by the Council's Corporate Safeguarding Group, which has representation from across the authority, and there's also been engagement with trade unions prior to bringing this policy here this afternoon for your consideration. I think really critically within this policy, it sets out very clearly the different types of activity that volunteers can undertake. It makes clear what is regulated activity that requires the highest standards of checks in terms of disclosure and barring services. It's very clear, as all policies should be, in terms of roles and responsibilities of individuals, including managers who will be engaging volunteers, and makes it very clear the sort of support that volunteers should get in undertaking their roles here for us in BCBC. I think we're hopeful that having a clear policy in place will actually enable us to engage more volunteers to support the work of the council by making sure that it's very clear about how we do that in a safe way. In terms of the safeguarding implications of this report, very clearly this has been framed in order to deter and ensure that we're in a very robust position as a local authority from people who may be attracted to volunteering roles in settings where they will have interaction with vulnerable people, by having very robust checks in place. So if I take you, Leader, to the recommendation of the report in 9.1, it's recommended that Cabinet approve the volunteer policy, which is Appendix 1 to the report. Thank you.
Thank you for that overview of the report. Claire, Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm more than happy to move this report, as I do believe we should have an expectation that we have good standards from all our volunteering efforts. But as the host, we also need to ensure that there's a good framework for them to be supported and assisted in as well. And I think the other comment that I would make is Claire referenced the value to our volunteers. And if I give you one prime example, is I know I have two parents, well, I want to say grandparents they are, that come into my school and they deliver additional reading with my pupils. And we couldn't do it without them. Those children would not benefit from the reading skills that they obtain just by sitting down with somebody to read a book. And I can't express my thanks to all those volunteers enough. Thanks very much.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader, and I'm sure that's gratitude that's shared by all Cabinet members for those volunteers who so freely give of their time to support other people. Councillor Blundell is next, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and just add my thanks as well as your own and the Deputy Leaders, to those volunteers who go into our schools and do such wonderful work in them. It's much appreciated, I'm sure, by all of us. Just the point I'd like to raise, probably the best place, Lindsay, to respond to this, but just to confirm that part of our schools audit is that there's a clear policy, that all schools must have a clear policy about engaging with volunteers, and so that everyone is protected. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Blundell. Lindsay, please.
Thanks, Leader. Thanks, Councillor Blundell. For the purpose of the recording, I'm Lindsay Harvey, Corporate Director of Education and Family Support. Yes, in response to your question, Section 12 of the report that's in front of you today specifies the requirements for schools. It references in the document Keeping Learners Safe, a document that was published by Welsh Government, I believe, in March 2022. It's a revised document. It's an excellent document, actually, produced by Welsh Government. And as part of that, one of the annex looks at safeguarding audits in schools. And I can confirm that we engage with all of our schools in annual audits. And that's been picked up as good practice by regulators. Thank you.
Thank you for that reassurance, Lindsay. Councillor Spanzik is next, please.
Thank you, Leader. Want to come through? Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Leader. Not a problem with the policy. It's a corporate policy. I just got a few sort of comments I'd like to make on it. It's quite rightly so focused on safeguarding and education and social services. But there's lots of great volunteers, hundreds of volunteers out there we have working through, as I say, keep bills tidy. but there's no mention of that. There's mention of Barbo, and great, I accept that. They do a lot of great work. But so to keep us tidy, some marvellous work done there through that section, which does conflict with this policy a little bit, I dare say, because the volunteering principles we have, that volunteers will not engage in work which was previously done by paid employees. And over the years of austerity, we do have volunteers that Little Picking are now doing work that 10 years ago we would have done as a county borough. I'm not saying that's anybody's fault. That's the situation we're in with austerity. This policy does conflict a little bit with the way then that this is a policy for BCBC, I suppose, but it does talk about a corporate policy and working with partners. And as is mentioned of Barvo in there, I think there should be some mention of the keep us tidy, that we direct people that way. There's just that one element, it does appear to be, it talks about green spaces and looking after our environment, but it doesn't really then acknowledge the vast amount of work that's done by third-party agencies on litter picking and keeping our environment clean, which we would have done as an authority maybe a lot more, would have 10 years ago. I'd just like to see that corporate approach a bit better in there.
Thank you for that, Councillor Spanzik. Can you respond to that, please, Claire?
Yeah, thank you very much for the comments, Councillor Spanswick. I think the reason that Barvo particularly are mentioned is because they are the county voluntary service, and you know, all local authority areas in Wales have a CVC, and they've got a very particular role, haven't they, in terms of promoting the third sector right across the county borough. And that's why particular reference is made to Barvo in here, and obviously they're very connected into the Wales Council for Voluntary Action, which has got, again, a very particular role in terms of supporting third sector and volunteering opportunities. I think it's really important to be clear what this policy is and is not. This policy is primarily a safeguarding policy, which sets out very clearly how we meet standards as a local authority for those volunteers who we engage directly ourselves to do work on behalf of the local authority. I think important in that principle is that I couldn't engage a volunteer to do work perhaps in terms of business support that, you know, is an established paid post, and that, I think that's why that is set out there in this policy in the way that it is. What this policy isn't is a strategy for volunteering in the county borough. I would suggest that might be a good thing for us to develop going forward to encourage even more engagement in civic activity. You know, volunteering is generally a very positive experience for those who do engage in volunteering, and it's something in terms of our whole approach around community development, community connection is something that we want to develop more right across the county borough. So I think it might be a piece of work we want to develop going forward, but that's not what this is this afternoon. This is a policy around engagement of volunteers directly by the local authority.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Claire. I know that the Deputy Leader wants to come in as well on this point, so I'll bring you in first, please.
Thank you very much for the question, Councillor Spanswick. I think the only additional comment that I would make, as well as Claire's response to you, is that we've had several conversations about the over-expectation of our residents out there, and you make reference to the good work of Keep Wales Tidy, and I don't disagree with the good work, particularly around the volunteers that have all set up groups and continue to do that. What I would say is that over the years, the council picked it up because there was nobody else to do it, and we took some pride in our communities. My expectation around our communities is that people have that pride again, that they need to take some ownership of that. Council officers do not go out there and drop litter around the streets for someone else to pick up. And I think we need to be very clear about what we're asking people to do. This policy is particularly around safeguarding, and it's particularly to ensure that anybody we leave with someone more vulnerable is protected. Thanks very much, Leader.
Yeah, thank you for that, Deputy Leader. And just to confirm, this policy covers those individuals who volunteer with the authority, not those volunteers who volunteer with third sector organisations, and I think that's the key difference, Councillor Spanzik. So of course we acknowledge the excellent work that volunteers undertake with Keep Wales Tidy, but that would be covered by their own volunteer policy. And what we will need to look to do is consider our volunteer strategy in the round, and that would of course consider how we best harness that army of volunteers that we have across the the county borough, most of whom volunteer with third sector and other organisations like charities in the county borough. Councillor Farr's next, please.
Thank you, Leader. I don't think anybody seconded the policy, so I will second the policy. And I would like to also say that I feel quite reassured from 4.2 that we're not going to be using volunteers to do any paid work, which I think is really reassuring for me. The other thing I feel reassured by is the fact if there is any expenses that volunteers undertake, we will reimburse that, and that will provide some training for them as well. So yeah, I'd like to second that. And I think volunteering provides people with opportunity to come and see a job, come and see what's being done, which will encourage them to maybe go into that profession. I know when I first joined the council, I came in as a mentee, and that's what taught me what the council was all about. So I think it's a really good. I think it's great to have a framework now. I know we had volunteers before, but we didn't have a framework. But it's good to have a safeguarding framework now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Farr. Councillor Williams is next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I accept the scope of this policy, as the Director pointed out, is to offer protection and in the role of safeguarding, and I absolutely get that. But I recognise also the point that Councillor Spanswick makes, and the good work that many volunteers are doing out there, and I absolutely get what you say, Leader, that we probably do need a volunteer policy to try and bring some sort of formality to that, and offer greater protection probably to other people who wish to take up volunteering. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. I can see is your finger hovering on the button there, Corporate Director for Social Services and Wellbeing, then I'll bring you in. Thank you.
Yeah, just to say that hopefully to provide some assurance, third sector organisations, I'm sure such as Keep Wales Tidy and others, will all have quite well developed volunteer policies. WCVA, who I referred to earlier, has got model volunteer policies. Barvo will have the same in terms of supporting other constituted groups to put their volunteer policies in place. So there's a lot of support out there for anybody who wants to engage volunteers. We're probably the last as the council to make sure we've got a formal policy for engaging volunteers, but it's important to have it. And as I think Councillor Farr said, what it does is to provide that framework so that we can safely engage volunteers successfully as a council. I would completely agree with what everybody said about a wider volunteering strategy, which looks at how we can promote volunteering as a positive opportunity for people of all ages across our communities.
Thank you for that, Claire. I think there are legacy hands on the screen, so the recommendation's been moved and seconded. I was finding out that certainly very much welcome the engagement that's taken place with trade union colleagues as well as the Bridgend Association of Voluntary Organisations. So it's been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement, please? Aye. Thank you, colleagues. We'll now receive the second report of the Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing on today's agenda, and that is on the joint inspection of child protection arrangements in the County Borough of Bridgend in June of this year. Claire, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. This report is the purpose of this report is to present to Cabinet the inspection report of the joint inspectors. There were 4 inspectors who were listed in the report into child protection arrangements in the County Borough. The inspection took place over 4 days back in June this year and covered education, safeguarding arrangements, covered children's services, covered the safeguarding arrangements of South Wales Police, and covered the safeguarding arrangements in Cwm Taf Morgannwg Health Board. So it was a very significant set of inspection activities. Myself and Lindsay Harvey, the Corporate Director of Education and Family Support provided leadership from an authority perspective in terms of that set of arrangements, and worked with senior colleagues across the Health Board and across South Wales Police to ensure that we really showed the positive partnership approach throughout the inspection activity. What was really pleasing is that despite the context in which we were operating and continue to operate around what we've described many times in this chamber, an exponential increase in the contacts into safeguarding arrangements in the county borough, that the 4 inspectorates agreed that there was a very positive vision in terms of safeguarding in this county borough, very positive relationships in terms of leadership with the Regional Safeguarding Board, the Cwmtaf Morgannwg Regional Safeguarding Board, which both holds us to account as individual agencies but also partners around the effectiveness of our multi-agency safeguarding arrangements. The report found significant areas of good practice. I would pay particular tribute to colleagues in Education and Family Support around education safeguarding in the county borough. It really did describe an exemplary set of arrangements in terms of education safeguarding, but found positive practice across all partner agencies. And from a children's social care perspective, I think following on from 2 significant single inspectorate inspections by Care Inspectorate Wales, what the inspection found is continued progress in terms of the improvements which the authority had committed to around safeguarding and protecting children, and very much evidence that improvement journey. I think, again, very pleasing in terms of the JICPA report was the fact that the immediate response to safeguarding concerns, it was deemed to be robust. They were particularly positive about the multi-agency safeguarding hub and the multi-agency work in which they evidenced in that hub, and they observed practice there, and the fact that meant that immediate safeguarding issues were addressed. What the report did find is that the ongoing safeguarding following that initial response was more variable, and they identified areas for improvement in terms of some of the timeliness as children moved through the system. A key theme, I think, in terms of areas for improvement within the report was around fragility across children's social care and other partner agencies around workforce, and the impact of the increase in demand and the increase in the level of contacts on the workforce and the frontline workforce. But again, they did evidence significant improvements in terms of children's social care and the stability of the workforce compared to their previous inspection findings. There are a number of areas for improvement which are set out within both the report and the action plan which is appended. The action plan, the implementation of the action plan is overseen by the Cwmtaf Morgannwg Regional Safeguarding Board. We've also shared the action plan with the 4 inspectorates, and they will monitor the implementation of that action plan through their ongoing regulatory activity. We had a very detailed scrutiny of the Joint Inspection Report by Overview and Scrutiny Committee 2, and it was positive that senior officers from South Wales Police, senior clinicians from Cwmtaf Morgannwg Health Board attended that scrutiny committee alongside officers from this council, and the scrutiny committee wrote to us following that scrutiny exercise to, I suppose, express their thanks for the positive improvements that they'd evidenced and the assurance that they'd received in response to their questioning. I think, again, just particularly positive within the JICPA and the improvements that are being made was one of our sort of wicked issues that we see in safeguarding, which is around multi-agency information sharing. And what inspectors were able to do was to witness a new system which has been developed by a neighbouring local authority for use across our region for recording safeguarding concerns within multi-agency safeguarding hubs. That's called the GOS system. They were able to witness that before it was implemented, and I'm really pleased to advise Cabinet this afternoon that system is now working effectively and addresses the recommendations which we often will see coming through in practice reviews. So in terms of ongoing monitoring of this report, I've also, of the implementation of the recommendations, I've already referred to the Cwmtaf Morgannwg Regional Safeguarding Board, and as your statutory officer for safeguarding, very happy to bring regular reports as you would see fit back into Cabinet in terms of progress and completion of the actions. As this is a regulatory report, the actions will go onto the regulatory tracker, which is also reported through the corporate performance assessment process. So, Leader, if I take you to the recommendation in line 1 of the report, it's recommended that Cabinet note the report on the joint inspection of child protection arrangements in Bridgend and the local authority improvement actions identified in the joint action plan.
Thank you for that comprehensive report, Claire. I will bring the Deputy Leader in first and then Councillor Blundell. Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. Can I move that we note the attached report? And I think it's important as members to reference that this report has been subject to rigorous scrutiny already, as Claire referenced, with all our stakeholders in attendance. But it was obvious to us at the end of the meeting that they really are content with our action plans because they raised no concerns with us or made any recommendations, and I think that's really important to note. We do have significant plans as to how we're going to continue to address the challenges, but I'd like to offer my sincere thanks to Claire, her team and our stakeholders for all their efforts as we make positive progress within children's services, and to Lindsay and his team for the positive report within the Education Department. And I look forward to reporting back to this committee in the future year. Thanks very much, Leader.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. And then we have Councillor Blundell, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. As the other Cabinet member who was chickpered, as we've come to call it now, we've invented a new verb. It is just very positive to see that the outcomes, and I concur with the Deputy Leader's comments about scrutiny. Definitely a shared vision from them that we are on the right path with this. I look forward to seeing regular updates and just to praise the work of both social services and education and everyone else in this council, because safeguarding is not the sole responsibility of one cabinet member, one councillor or one directorate. It is the sole responsibility of us all. It is our number one priority, bar balancing the books as Karis looks at me. Just to say thank you to everyone who took part in this, and I look forward to seeing regular updates on how we're progressing forward. And I don't think I did it, but I'll second the report.
Thank you for that, Councillor Blundell. I wanted to reflect on the good practice that was recognised in the report. I think it's important that is appreciated. We certainly appreciate the work of staff who are dealing with unprecedented levels of casework, unprecedented levels of cases, and seemingly increasingly complex cases as well. And one of the strengths that was identified is the way that different partners work together, even when teams are in different organisations, whether it be the police, the health board, the local authority. We work together to keep children safe, and that's crucial going forward. I'm pleased to see that the action plan is a detailed action plan, that there are timescales and milestones, and many of those timescales and milestones have already been met in terms of, for example, additional training, new system of recording information, very important action points. And I'm pleased that in addition to the Regional Safeguarding Board carefully monitoring this plan, we will also monitor it as an organisation through our Social Services Improvement Board, which of course is attended by elected representatives, including group leaders. But I do think it's important, as the Deputy Leader describes, that we do have a report back on the progress, the good progress that's been made, but for completeness we do need to have a report back to Cabinet ultimately when we complete all the action points, and I think it would be timely to have a report back within 6 months. I think there'll be much to report, and then hopefully within a year we would have completed many, if not all, of the action points arising from the inspection. And my final point then and question was around future inspections. I hate to raise that just before Christmas. I know it didn't exactly fill us with joy that this was announced. I do think there's an opportunity to make the case to the different inspectorates that there is alignment and synchronization of the individual inspections with the joint inspection, because this is a new inspection and it does require a huge amount of effort and work, doesn't it, for staff within different organisations to prepare for that inspection and then undertake it by meeting with inspectors, bringing together case files, etc. So I think there's an important point that we raise with those inspectorates, that there's an alignment between joint and single inspections. Claire, please.
Thank you very much, Leader, and reflect the impact, I think, on the workforce of frequent inspections, although we obviously understand and value, the inspection regime. I've got the benefit of sitting on the local authority advisory group for Care Inspectorate Wales, and that's the appropriate place really to make some of the points that you've made there, Leader, about how inspections are planned, that inspection schedule, to that alignment with other inspectorates. We're seeing increasing numbers of joint inspections. More frequently in my world, it's joint inspections with Health Inspectorate Wales for areas like community mental health teams, and I think there's some plan for learning disability teams in the next year. But this joint inspection was a set of arrangements on a different level again, given the numbers of inspectorates who were involved, given the number of individual inspectors who were involved. So I know that the inspectorates are completing their last JICPA in Wales in this current round, and then I think they'll take the opportunity to reflect and advise us as leads really in terms of how they plan to continue to inspect going forward. What I would say is that actually, from a safeguarding perspective, it made a lot of sense to have a joint inspection. Often we'll see in children's services, or not to speak for Lindsay, perhaps education, looking at safeguarding performance through that individual lens, whereas, as you've said, Leader, safeguarding is, by its very nature, a multi-agency arrangement, and you're as strong, perhaps, as your weakest link when you're working in a multi-agency environment. So that strength in partnership was one of the particular pleasing strengths of this particular report, and the fact that we've pulled together in the light of that increase in demand rather than to retreat into silos. So I think that showed a really positive response from Bridgend and showed the value of a joint inspection on this occasion.
Thank you for that, Claire. Please convey our appreciation and thanks to the staff that experienced this joint inspection. So the recommendations have been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement? Thank you, and thank you, Claire. So the next report of the Corporate Director of Social Services and Wellbeing is on the proposed infection prevention and control policy. Claire, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. This report before you this afternoon asks for Cabinet approval of a new infection prevention and control policy for regulated care settings that we provide directly ourselves as Bridgend County Borough Council. It is a requirement under the Regulation and Inspection of Care Act that regulated care settings have a very clear infection prevention and control policy in place. And we've seen over recent years, haven't we, the importance of these policies in keeping people safe during such challenges as the COVID-19 pandemic. But notwithstanding that pandemics, thankfully, are very unusual, we're frequently dealing with infections within regulated care settings, and it's very important that there's clarity of roles and responsibilities, that staff have the appropriate training, that they have the appropriate equipment, and are able to keep people safe. So that's the real focus and purpose of having a policy in this area. I'm pleased to advise that in the development of this policy, there's been strong joint working between corporate health and safety, department within the council, shared regulatory services, who are our public protection function as Bridgend County Borough Council, so that the content of the policy is very evidence-based, and obviously it provides links into Public Health Wales guidance, and that is the context in which we operate in Wales. So if I take you to the recommendation of the report, it is in 9.1, it's recommended that Cabinet approve the infection prevention and control policy for implementation across regulated care services provided by the Social Services and Wellbeing Directorate.
Thank you for that, Claire. Deputy Leader, please.
Thanks very much, Leader. I think Claire and I need to actually look at each other's notes before we present to Cabinet or Council, if I'm honest. I've got a big ream here about COVID-19 and how much of the risk for service users and staff, but I'm more than happy to move and approve of the infection prevention and control policy. We know that during the pandemic, we had significant resource issues in relation to prevention and control. Indeed, I retrained and went back out, so I think that's something, and I know that I turned up to a nursing home and I couldn't get any PPE. I had one mask for the whole of my shift, and some of those residents in that setting were end of life at the time, which was really significant. We do need to ensure that all preventative measures are taken for the protection of some of our most vulnerable residents in the community, and we need to ensure that mitigation of any infectious disease should be of the highest priority, while ensuring that our residents continue to live the most independent life that they can, and part of that is around infection and prevention control, and this policy can do just that. Thank you very much, Leader.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. May seem like a very dry policy, but it's a very important policy that we have in place for the reasons that the Deputy Leader has just outlined. Infection control and prevention is so important, particularly in the settings that we manage, where we're supporting some of the most vulnerable people in the County Borough of Bridgend. Do I have someone that...
happy to second, Leader.
You're happy to second it, Councillor Farr, and I note as well that this policy has been submitted to trade union colleagues and they're supportive of the policy, which is, of course, important. So, been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement, please, colleagues? Thank you. And we'll now receive the next report on the agenda, and we will give the Corporate Director for Social Services and Wellbeing a break and ask the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change to present a report on the development of our strategic equality plan for 2024 to 2028. Carys, please.
Okay, thank you, Leader. Just for the sake of the recording, I'm Carys Lord, the Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change. So the purpose of this report is to seek Cabinet approval to commence a public consultation on the draft Strategic Equality Plan for the period 2024 to 2028. The Equality Act requires that all public bodies in Wales must comply with the public sector equality duties, and these include to eliminate discrimination, harassment and victimisation, advance equality of opportunity, and foster good relationships between those who share protected characteristics and those who do not. A specific duty requires this Council to produce a strategic equality plan, within which the Council must publish equality objectives describing how the most pressing issues for people in Bridgend will be addressed over the coming 4 years. Some draft objectives have been developed and activities have been undertaken to get us to this point, and these are outlined for you in paragraph 3.1 of today's report. There are 6 proposed objectives, and these are also outlined for you in the table contained at paragraph 3.3. The purpose of this consultation is to outline the overarching objectives, which will then enable us to draw together an action plan to support these as we move forward. The consultation aims to seek the views of residents, staff, elected members and stakeholders on these proposed objectives. We intend to make sure that we engage as many people as possible across our communities and minority groups as part of this consultation to make sure that we capture the wisest views that we can for the equality plan. We're currently consulting on the engagement and participation strategy, and we would like to use some of the techniques that we've used in there to ensure that we do cover as wide an area as possible through this consultation process. So if I can, Leader, I'll just take you to section 9 of this report, where it's recommended that Cabinet give approval for the commencement of a public consultation on the draft strategic equality plan, and note that the final strategy will be reported back to Cabinet for approval. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that overview of the report, Caris. Councillor Farr, please.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, I'd like to recommend the report. I couldn't think of the word then. And thank you, Caris, for bringing the report forward. I just wanted the members to be aware that this report has gone to the Equality Cabinet Committee meeting, where it was lots of questions were asked at that meeting. I'm not sure if that's been put into this report, so I think we need to have a look at that. On page 106, we've got the date when the consultation will begin, and we've just got the month on there, not the actual date. So I guess we need to go back to see when are we looking to go out to consultation, because the date hasn't been put in. And I think the other thing I wanted to know is how are we planning on engaging with young people? Also, I think in the Equality Cabinet meeting, we asked about how we're going to engage with people with disability, especially those with visual impairments. And I noticed that there's going to be some workshops. Just wondering, how did we identify these workshops, and have we got any workshop planned up in the valleys, please? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Farr. Caris, please.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Some of the issues that were raised in the committee that you've already mentioned have already started, actually. So work has already been done to link with other teams that are already carrying out some public engagement sessions to make sure that we can link and access as many people as we can. So, for instance, we're doing some joint work now with the Community Safety Partnership, who are doing some consultation, and we've also carried out some work with other groups who are also working on this. We've also established some new links with the college to ensure that we get the views of younger people, and I think that came up as possibly a suggestion at that previous committee meeting. And we had a couple of meetings, and actually we've had some very good information, very good feedback from the young people that we've met via that. Also, the team has been asked to support an equalities project at Bryntegg School. And so we're going to use this as well as a way of linking with the with the children and the young people at the school, so that we can feed their views into this particular strategy when we bring it forward to you. And additionally, the Youth Council, we've also had an interactive session with them on some of these, and they've helped to shape some of the objectives. And obviously, we will go back out to talk to them now about the final objectives to see whether they have any further comments. So we are trying to work across the piece and learning what we have done from other consultations to make sure that we access as many groups as we possibly can during this period. If this is approved by Cabinet now, we will start the consultation process straight away, because conscious that this strategy is due to come into being in April. Therefore, we will start the consultation straight away, as long as it's approved this afternoon by Cabinet.
Thank you for that, Kat. Certainly welcome the involvement of young people in the strategy. I know our Youth Council would be very pleased to be involved. I can see there is a schedule for community workshops across the county borough, excuse me, included in Maesteg, Pencoed, Porthcawl, Bridgend and Pyle. Can I suggest that we also include a workshop in the Ogmore Valley and indeed in the Gow Valley as well, please, Caris? And I know that myself and the Chief Executive have had a letter off the Minister for Equalities at the UK government, reminding us of our duties, because we do have duties around equalities. Excuse me. And I'm sure we'll look to make sure that those duties are fully reflected in this plan. So the recommendation's been moved. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Councillor Williams, any other comments or questions, please? No? Okay, in which case we will move on to the... Thank you for that, Caris. We'll move on to the next report from our Chief Officer for Finance, Performance and Change, and that is on the proposed Housing Support Programme strategy and homelessness strategy for 2022 up until 2026. Over to you, please, Caris. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. The purpose of this report is to seek Cabinet approval of the final Housing Support Programme strategy for 2022-2026 and also the action plan, which can then be submitted to Welsh Government. So the Housing Wales Act 2014 places a duty on the authority to carry out a homelessness review for the area and then to formulate and adopt a homelessness strategy based on the results of that review. The review and strategy must look at the achievement of the following key objectives. Firstly, the prevention of homelessness, then that suitable accommodation is and will be available for people who are or may become homeless, and that satisfactory support is available for people who are or may become homeless. A review for this council has been drafted and it was provided the necessary information to inform the homelessness strategy. This was considered by Cabinet when the draft strategy was presented back in July this year. The key messages from that review highlighted that the council is dealing with the highest level of presentations, which has been influenced by the all-in approach required of local government. Whilst the number of applications has dropped slightly since 2020-2021, there is still a marked increase in homelessness presentations compared to the figures at the time of the 2018 homelessness review and strategy. The demand for social housing has increased, and as of July this year, there were 2,600 applicants on our common housing register here in Bridgend. The use of temporary accommodation has grown exponentially, with these figures strongly impacted by the all-in-one approach that was adopted during COVID and has remained in place. And there is a lack of private rented accommodation available within the local housing allowance rate in Bridgend, and this is reducing the number of private landlords who are willing to accept the rents payable and therefore the use of their accommodation. Following Cabinet's consideration and approval in July, there has been a consultation on the draft Housing Support Programme strategy and action plan, and this closed on the 12th of October. The consultation received 33 online responses, with the majority of respondents agreeing with the proposed strategic priorities and objectives, and either agreeing or partially agreeing that the action plan details the steps that are required to deliver this strategy. The draft strategy and action plan was also considered at an all-member briefing session in September and was also considered by the Subject and Overview Scrutiny Committee 3. And the recommendations received from committee are detailed for you at paragraph 3.4 of this afternoon's report. So the strategy and the action plan have been revised, taking into account the comments received during the consultation period, and the updated documents are now attached for you. This area of service is now a large area of spend for the council due to the changes in requirements for this particular service. We do receive grant funding from Welsh Government to support this service area, although the grant did reduce from 3.6 million last year to just over 1 million this year. The council has previously made decisions to increase the core budget for homelessness due to the increased demand, and have actually put additional monies into the base budget, which has increased our core budget to £2.7 million for homelessness. At the end of Q2, the predicted spend on this service was 3.9 million, which shows the level of increase of spend in this particular area. So work is ongoing to address the issues regarding the use of temporary accommodation, and it is included in the action plan for today's report. Just to reassure you that we will be monitoring the action plan to ensure we're meeting the targets that we've outlined, and also to ensure that some of the practice outlined in this action plan actually becomes part of our routine work as we move forward. So if I may, Leader, can I please take you to the recommendations at section 9 of this afternoon's report, where it's recommended that Cabinet approve the Housing Support Programme strategy, the homelessness strategy, for the year 2020 up to 2026, and the action plan, both of which should then be submitted to Welsh Government. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that overview of the report, Carys. I will bring Councillor Good in first, then we've got the Deputy Leader, and then Councillor Farr. Councillor Good, please.
Thank you, Carys, for taking us through this report. I don't know about you, but I feel like we've been talking about this strategy for quite a long time. But I'm very glad that we've got it here in front of Cabinet today, and that the amendments and changes suggested by, I know, both Cabinet members and scrutiny members have been included. I think the thing to note here, as has already been mentioned by the Director, is homelessness and housing is facing really unprecedented levels of need at the moment. And I think as part of that, I think it should be reflected on that earlier today, the organisation that helps advise providers of homelessness services across Wales were talking about the Welsh Government budget and mentioned that if there isn't a significant increase of funding from Welsh Government, there is likely that 40% of homelessness services will start handing back contracts to the local authority, meaning that we will not have service provision to help these people. And that is a very concerning place to be. I think we all know the constraints that budgets are currently under, but of course, Welsh Government have said for several years now that they believe in ending homelessness in Wales. But I think my reflection on that is, in order to do that, we need to ensure that those services are funded properly and that housing is funded properly in Wales. So I do hope that we will see more funding coming from Welsh Government to help us make sure that we can look after these people who need our help. And you know, as most people know, a lot of people in the UK are one paycheck away from homelessness, and it could happen to any single one of us. So I think it's important for us to reflect on that. And I know I will be pushing wherever possible for with the Minister and with other Welsh Government officials to make sure that we do get proper funding for these important services. But I'll leave it there, Leader. I'm happy to move the report. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Good, and I'm sure we'd all share that view about the importance of the housing support grant to supporting some of the most vulnerable citizens in our communities. Deputy Leader is next, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm happy to second the report, but can I ask for an amendment, please, considering my corporate parenting responsibilities, because this doesn't commit to the corporate parenting charter, which we have asked officers to consider. They make reference to our strategy, but it doesn't make reference to the charter. And the corporate parent Welsh Government charter states a promise for Wales, a shared parenting pledge, which the local authority will want to formally adopt. And it states a stable home. We will seek out and provide stable places to live that are right for all care experienced children and young people. This is because all children have a right to special protection if they don't live with their family, and that's Article 20, Leader. So I am asking for that amendment to be made to this policy and for us to adopt that as a council. And then I do have so do you want to deal with that first before I make a further comment?
Thank you, Deputy Leader. That's a commitment and a responsibility as a corporate parent that's shared by all Cabinet members. So I'm sure, but I will check with colleagues that there will be full support for that commitment. And of course, more importantly than making the commitment is identifying the actions that will improve the support that we offer to our care leavers. And I know there's a particular strand of work underway at the moment to do exactly that. Is everyone in agreement with that proposed amendment before we take a vote on it later in the meeting? But you're all happy with that? Okay, thank you, colleagues. Yeah, do you want to come back into Deputy Leader?
Thank you very much, Leader, and thank you very much, colleagues. I do have a statement or a question, I suppose, really. because like other residents out there, I did watch the documentary last week on housing in Wales and the challenges that we all face. And the report outlines the increased dependency on temporary accommodation in recent years. But I would ask what is being done to ensure that they move into permanent accommodation as quickly as possible, and how long is the current average wait for this, appreciating that some families have more specific requirements. And I do appreciate the challenge, but we are in breach of legislation currently, and it is something that we need to deal with quite urgently. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you for that, Deputy Leader. Do you want to respond to that, please, Carys?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. It is a very important one, looking at the use that we do currently make of temporary accommodation. As Cabinet will be aware, we're not a stockholding local authority, which means we don't manage our own housing stock. Therefore, we do have some less flexibility maybe than those authorities that do manage their own stock. However, saying that, we do have a number of support services in place to try and ensure that we do move people from temporary accommodation as quickly as we can. So we have a rapid rehousing approach, which is mentioned in the documents this afternoon. But through that, we work with partners in the registered social landlord sector to move people through temporary accommodation and into their RSL units as quickly as we possibly can. There is a limit on that because they will obviously only have a fixed housing stock as well, but that has been working well to move people through the system. Cabinet also approved back in November the launching of a private rent sector leasing scheme, which will enable us to access more houses in the private sector to be able to have move-on accommodation for people. We are also giving some targeted support through some of our commissioned providers to all households to work through any barriers that they may have in accessing accommodation. And this includes things like paying some deposits for people to move into private accommodation. And we are developing projects through the Social Housing Grant and the Transitional Capital Funding this year in particular to increase the number of units available. So we do have a number of examples of what we can do in that. And I could maybe just outline some of those, Leader, because that will show you what we're trying to do to improve the amount of accommodation that we've got. So through the Housing Support Grant, we have a £35 million programme over 3 years, which is going to deliver 387 units. And we're working through that programme now, working with our colleagues in the RSLs to ensure that programme moves as quickly as possible. We've also had transitional capital funding this year from Welsh Government. It has to be spent this year, but Bridgend was awarded £3.6 million, which actually was probably us doing better than we'd anticipated. And we're using that to purchase some empty properties so that they can be used, and the RSL's working with us on that. But also some of them have got voids which are difficult for them to remedy, and there is some money going into that as well to help them bring those back into use. That money has to be spent this year, so there's pressure in the system to get that done, but that will release new stock for us all to be able to use. So we are doing what we can, and we do have some money within our own capital programme as well, which we're looking at purchasing possibly some houses in multiple occupation so that we have accommodation in particular for single people who are presenting as homeless, and that's a new cohort of people. So we are looking to do that as well as BCBC really to try and progress that. So there are a number of different strands of work being going on. I have to say though, you asked the question about how long are people sometimes waiting in order to move from temporary accommodation. The current average length of stay in temporary accommodation is 160 days. Now this does vary because of individual circumstances and particular needs that people presenting as homeless may have, and that will impact on the length of stay that they have. But that is not a figure that we want to be working with, which is why we've got all of these initiatives running now to try and bring down the length of stay that people have once they're in temporary accommodation.
Thank you for that, Carys. There's a lot of work ongoing at the moment, isn't there, to improve and increase the amount of stock available. Councillor Farr's next, please.
Thank you, Leader. I've got two questions and a recommendation, but I think you've already answered one of my questions. My first question is, what steps are being undertaken to understand why Bridgend have more people in temporary accommodation than other local authorities? For us ongoing, can I suggest that we get rid of the word ongoing and put a date in there so that we've got a date when we'll be reviewing when this action. So if it's an action, we've got a date, we can review it, have we achieved it? If not, why not? What do we need to change? Rather than having the word ongoing, because it means it's never ending then. There's no targets. Thank you, Leader.
Caris, please.
Thank you very much for your questions. With regards to homeless referrals, we're doing a piece of work now to look at why our referral rate or presentation rates are higher than in other areas. And so we're doing that by working with other areas, asking the questions to see whether our processes are different, whether our criteria are different. So we are looking at that now to understand that. You asked questions about building our own housing stock. I outlined for you in the previous answer, we're doing a lot of work with actually registered social landlords and private landlords about increasing our stock. I also mentioned about the houses for multiple occupation. Currently, we're looking at BCBC acquiring those buildings and properties, and then we will need to take a decision about whether that's the long-term best way of managing that property. What we don't have behind us is a big organisation that can run the maintenance and repairs of any properties. But obviously we will look at what the best way of managing some of these properties as we get them and we get experience of managing the small number that we're talking about purchasing at the moment. And then on the target dates, I think that's a very well made point. There are a number ongoing within that. I outlined for you, for instance, some of the actions in relation to increasing the amount of stock that we have available. I've outlined what we're doing. Target dates on some of those are difficult because it takes such a long time to move from planning right the way through, planning to actually even think about the scheme right the way through to delivery. But what we will do is, as those discussions with the grant recipients continue, we will start to tie them down to dates and we will monitor them. And I think that's one of the reasons I mentioned when I presented the report that we'll bring back reports on progress against that action plan so that you can see exactly how we're doing against those actions.
Thank you for that, Caris. Certainly welcome those additional milestones. I'll bring Councillor Farr back in, please.
I think having a date will give us a time frame when to come back for an update. I think that's what, instead of having the word ongoing, if we had a date there, we know that's when you are coming back to us with an update. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think those are points well made, Councillor Farr. I think having the action plan is certainly the right action plan. It's just adding some detail around numbers, for example, and I think we can be pleased with the level of investment that's taking place at the moment. We all recognise, by the way, that we need more investment, and indeed, as soon as we seem to be able to make new properties available, then they're occupied, and we need more, unfortunately. But we are bringing new properties online all the time. And myself and Councillor Gooden, I believe some of the other local members, Councillor Easterbrook, attended one of the new facilities in Park Street, and it was pleasing to see the partnership that we've got with the organisations to deliver some of that temporary accommodation and ensure that that temporary accommodation is accommodation that is only temporary and helps equip people with the right skills to move on to more permanent accommodation. That's very important. that we have managed and supported accommodation, and I know this is very much part of our plans too. Councillor Williams, you wanted to come in, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. And can I first sort of welcome report and thank you for bringing this report before us this afternoon. It's quite interesting, I suppose, to read then that 59% of those presentations are seeking one-bed accommodation, and it's clearly a shortage of accommodation, and that is one of the probably one of the solutions that we need to address going forward. So I'm just wondering whether or not, in the interest of a one council approach, I suppose, that our planning policies need to be better aligned to the needs of our residents, and therefore when planning applications come forward, we need to make sure then that the mix of properties are appropriate and aligned with our housing policy. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. Caris, please.
No, thank you for that question. I think that's a very important point, because I think what comes through from the paper you've got today is the cohort of people who now present as homeless is far more varied than it used to be 3 or 4 years ago, and the issue we therefore have is we don't necessarily have the right accommodation any longer at the level that we need it. Certainly we're doing some work with the social landlords with regards to the money that we've got to fund new builds, which I outlined a minute ago, actually ensuring that they're building what we need and not maybe what they always have done in the past. Certainly with current the working between the housing service, planning and the corporate landlord sections has improved dramatically in the last 6 months. And we're all working together now to identify pieces of land that may be of use for, as you've just outlined, smaller pieces of smaller types of accommodation, smaller types of temporary accommodation, to identify those and work together as to how we could get those through the current planning process in a way that would be appropriate. But I think in the longer term, you're right, we need to make sure that this need is linked through our LDP, and then it's identified there as a priority for us as a council.
Thank you for flagging that, Councillor Williams, and for that response, Caris. That is going to be very important going forward. I think that needs to be fully reflected in our housing strategy, because there's a wider strategy than this strategy, but they're also linked together, aren't they? One question from me was around assessing the strategy against our equality objectives and identifying any possible groups of individuals, for example, who have protected characteristics that perhaps having a different experience of homelessness in Bridgend to others. I know there's reference to many of those protected characteristics, but not to all of them. And I think it's important that we recognise that can be a risk for some people, and of course, as we've spoken about earlier, we have a duty, don't we, around eliminating discrimination and ensuring that equality is achieved wherever it possibly can be. So I'd be interested to hear about the analysis around the equalities objectives and agenda in the sphere of homelessness, please. Thank you, Caris.
Thank you for that question. When we undertook the statement of need, we did look at all issues really, and they are included in the analysis of the sensor data that we have. We are actually going to publish that statement of need on the strategy along with on the website as well. I'll start again. We are going to publish the statement of need on our website alongside the strategy and the action plan, and that will have obviously a lot of detail in it. So the needs assessment summarises the statement of need. There were no significant findings in relation to certain groups that came up through that assessment when we undertook it, and therefore there are no specific issues related to that in the action plan. However, we will continue to monitor and to pick up issues because we do work well with the registered social landlords across the county, and we will pick up on any issues. And this action plan has to be fluid to a certain extent because it needs to respond to issues as they arise. So whereas nothing was in particular was picked up at the time of the review, we will continue to scan to make sure that if there are issues arising that are unique to a particular group across Bridgend, that we will take the necessary actions we can take to make sure that they're not disadvantaged in any way with regards to housing services.
Thank you for that, Cass. That's reassuring. And I can see in the report where there are trends, they have been identified. So, for example, sadly, there has been a 91% increase in referrals of violence against women and domestic abuse and sexual violence, and that being a factor in homelessness or the risk of being made homeless. And I know we've got specific services, don't we, tailored to meet the needs of those people. And I would take this opportunity to say that there is support available. So if there are victims of domestic abuse out there who are fearful that by coming forward their homes are at risk, and we have specific safe places to offer them, and we'd want them to come forward so we can provide that support to them. I note that also we've looked at age within the homelessness, and thankfully there's not been a significant increase in youth homelessness, but again we need to keep a careful eye on that because it is a risk. And then just another question from me, a final question. I'm pleased to see that we're reporting on the data for armed forces personnel or veterans. And I can see that sadly, since 2020, 8 homelessness applications were received as a direct result of people leaving the armed forces. I think it would be helpful to understand how we've supported those individuals, because I know we've provided some support to those veterans. Sadly, in one respect, it's not a high number of the total proportion, is it? It's quite a small number. But of course we would say that 8 is 8 too many, and there's a role there, isn't there, for the armed forces to better support people who are leaving their care, because they have a duty as well. So we'd be interested in having some further information, if not today, then in the future. And I say that because I can see the armed forces veteran is attending the meeting as well, so I'm sure he'd be interested as well, Councillor Jones. Okay, so the recommendation's been moved and seconded. Is everyone in agreement with those recommendations, subject to some of that additional detail going into the action plan, and as outlined by Councillor Farr, and subject to the commitment as outlined by the Deputy Leader. All in agreement. Thank you, colleagues. We will now move on to receiving a report of the Chief Officer for Legal, Regulatory, HR and Corporate Policy, and that is on our hybrid working policy. And I know we've been joined by our Group Manager for Human Resources, so very warm welcome to Paul, who will be taking us through this report. So over to you, please, Paul.
Thank you, Leader. For the purpose of the record, my name is Paul Miles and I'm the Group Manager for Human Resource and Organisation Development. The purpose of this report is to seek approval of the reviewed hybrid working policy. Back in October 22, the Council implemented an interim working
interim hybrid working policy. This policy set out a framework for hybrid working at the council. Significant consultation took place at that time with local trade union representatives in relation to the development of the policy. The trade union representatives, while supporting the policy, did have some concerns about its implementation. It was therefore agreed to implement the policy on an interim basis in order to have some consideration to any feedback, concerns raised by staff following the implementation of that. The annual staff survey held in December 22 was utilised to obtain staff feedback with a selection of questions specifically addressing hybrid working. Just taking you through some of the feedback, the key points in that feedback in relation to hybrid working. The positive feedback did say 62% of respondents confirmed that their roles were subject to the new interim hybrid working policy. 72% of respondents agreed that they were satisfied with the new interim hybrid working policy and it supported working arrangements which enable them to meet work demands. And 70% of respondents agreed that the flexi-time working hours scheme and the hybrid working allowed them to achieve a good work-life balance. Trade unions then confirmed that they were happy that we could look to adopt the interim policy on a permanent basis. The policy has been shared with Corporate Management Board and Cabinet CMB. Additionally, just a reference at the national level, the National Joint Council provided a commitment that employers should provide guidance on home working within their 2022 pay agreement, and this policy meets that requirement. So if I can take you to the recommendations of paragraph 9 and ask the Cabinet to approve the hybrid working policy for full implementation.
Thank you for that report, Paul. Councillor Williams, please.
Do I have to say all that again?
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul, for the report. This is the... I know, that's awful, that, isn't it? I need someone to put the mic on for me, don't I? Right, yeah. No, I'm happy to move the report, move the recommendation. Yeah, I welcome this report. There's been a lot of good work taking place on this. I've lost my train of thought now, I'm sorry. I was on a roll and then you interrupted me. Right. Yes, so this has been in operation now for over 12 months. It's been very well received by the staff, and yeah, we're happy to move the report. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you very much for the report. Paul, I suppose I've got one question for you, and that is, on our staff contracts, none of them say that their home is their place of work, do they? Please.
Paul, please. Thank you.
No, that's right. Contracts still have the civic office as the main point of work for those working hybrid, and that continues to be the place. Yeah.
Right, thank you very much, Leader, and I'm happy to second the report.
Okay, thank you for that, Deputy Leader. So, report has been moved and seconded. I'm certainly in support. Very pleased to see that we've got support from our trade union colleagues on this, representing the workforce. It's now seen as an advantage to the organisation and a benefit for some people who want to work for the organisation, and that's important because we know we struggle to recruit in all sorts of departments and services now, and also see that there's significant benefits to the organisation as well to having people who are able to work more flexibly from different places. So it's moved and seconded. Everyone in agreement, please? Thank you, colleagues. And thank you very much, Paul. And I think I may not have described you with your full title. So it's Group Manager for Human Resources and Organisational Development. I know that part is a very important part of your role as well. So apologies for that, Paul. We will now move on to the information report full noting from the Chief Officer for Legal, Regulatory, HR and Corporate Policy, and that certainly is your full title. Over to you, please, Kelly.
Thank you, Leader. For the purposes of recording, my name is Kelly Watson. I am the Chief Officer for Legal, Regulatory, HR and Corporate Governance. I'm just here today to introduce the information report for noting that's been published since your last scheduled meeting. You'll see a paragraph 3.1. The information report is in relation to the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000. As we are an authorised body, we need to report this annually to Cabinet to note, but you will find in the report that we haven't actually used those powers since 2014. I therefore ask Cabinet to note the report. Thank you, Leader.
Second. So report's been moved and noted. Everyone in agreement? Okay. Thank you, colleagues. The next item on the agenda is to receive any urgent items. We've had no urgent items put to me as chair, and therefore we will now move on to the proposal to exclude the public from the next part of the meeting, and I will ask the monitoring officer to take us through the process of excluding the public from this part of the meeting. Kelly, please.
Thank you, Leader. You determined in your last meeting on the 21st of November 2023 to deal with this item in closed session. You felt at that time it was appropriate to exclude the public. My advice would be that the situation remains the same as then, and therefore the minutes should also be considered in private session.
I certainly don't consider that the circumstances have changed significantly since then. Of course, they will change at some point in the future. So I move that we exclude the public. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you. If everyone is in agreement, we will